Becky and I will be presenting an ongoing research that we are working on. A group of us, some of the faculty members and doctoral students, we have taken up this project. We wanted to know how the COVID-19 pandemic impacted small business owners in general, in particularly women-owned small businesses. So we're going to be presenting some of our very preliminary findings. So the majority of the paper or presentation will be on kind of a literature review, what we know so far, and just talking about in the second half, Becky will take over and talk about an interview that she has conducted that will shed some light on some of the issues that we are dealing with. So just get us started. So what is the problem? So small businesses, as we know, are vital to the economic growth in the United States and in California. So typically small businesses suffer more during recessions because they have much smaller cash reserves than larger businesses. And they usually have a more difficult time securing a bank loan, for example. With COVID-19 pandemic in particular, it was even more damaging to small businesses because small businesses account for a large share of jobs in the hardest hit sectors. Like retail, food and beverage, and personal care services were among the most affected sectors due to the dramatic decline in sales and revenues following the shutdowns. So the purpose of our research and presentation today is to assess the impact of COVID pandemic on small businesses owned by women in San Diego. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll provide some literature review and share with you some of the insights from interviews we conducted with small businesses affairs representatives and a women entrepreneur in San Diego. So just let's start with the definition of what is a small business, right? So it depends on the kind of industry that we're talking about, believe it or not, and is based on the business's number of employees and the average annual receipts. So small businesses, but overall for this research or for this presentation purposes, small businesses will refer to those with fewer than 500 employees. And small businesses, as you mentioned, are vital to economic growth. And two separate research conducted recently by the US Census Bureau and the Kauffman Foundation, this was before the COVID pandemic, they both found that the net job growth was strongest among businesses with less than 20 employees. So when we think about it, so we are talking about 500 employees, but the actual, impact, the biggest impact of growth is actually taking place with really small businesses with less than 20 or less employees. So that is interesting. And in California, it's the same, the 2.9 trillion economy, the successful economy of California is based in part on small businesses and how well they have been doing. So this is a graph that compares California and United States in terms of the number of small businesses. So what is important to point out or to focus is the columns number 3 and 5. As you can see, the percent of businesses that are small are 99.9%. I mean, it's really a huge percent of the businesses in US and in California are small businesses by our definition.
Dr. Saba?
Saba,
yes.
can you make it so the screen shows the slide that you're talking about?
Okay.
Please.
So I'm so sorry. So this happened in my classes in the past. So I was talking over the presentation and my students informed me that they cannot see it. So thank you. So that's why I'll continue with this format. I think it's my computer. I apologize. So thank you, Dr. Nair, for informing me. So this is the graph that we're looking at. So California and United States in general. So as I said, column 3, 99% of businesses in both California and US in general are actually what we call small businesses, 500, again, the definition to remind everybody, 500 or less employees. And then the last column, if you look at it, these small businesses actually account for almost 50% of employment of the workforce. So this is a huge number, as you can see. And that kind of goes to show you how important these companies are. So I'm looking at my notes so that I'm not missing anything. Exactly. Okay, so we can move forward. So in San Diego, now that we talked about California and US briefly, in San Diego, we see a very similar pattern. Small businesses are also the backbone of the regional economy in San Diego, similar to US and California. And they represent about 98% of San Diego's businesses, and they employ actually higher rate, roughly 59% of the workforce in San Diego. And it's projected that small businesses will be the primary driver of San Diego's economic growth in the near future. Oh, yes, so this is slide. So this slide actually goes a little bit in detail in terms of, the workforce in relation to the size of the business. So almost 65% of the San Diego small businesses employ less than 4 people. So this is huge, which make up about 7% of the total employment. And when we look at the size of businesses that employ the highest number of workers, it is the businesses that employ 20 to 50 employees, and they employ 18% of the workforce in San Diego. And businesses that employ 20 to 250, that range, employ almost 50% of the overall workforce. So again, 250 and less actually employs the majority of the workforce in San Diego. So that is an important point to keep in mind, and how important small businesses are, and to support them for the for the growing economy in San Diego. So this is another slide just kind of to show you the kinds of industries, the top 10 industries in San Diego. So professional, scientific, and technical services make up for 14%, followed by finance, real estate, insurance, retail, information and communication technology, and construction. They both have 5.7%, and manufacturing, healthcare, dining, biotechnology and pharmaceuticals are 3.8%. I would have expected that to be higher in San Diego, so I was also surprised. And then personal services are all in the top 10 kinds of different small business industries in San Diego. Now let's move on to specifically to talk about women or businesses, small businesses that are owned by women, I should call it. So the number of businesses, women business owners have been increasing in the US over the past decades. Currently, there are 11.6 million businesses owned by women entrepreneurs. Women own or co-own 45% of businesses in the US, and almost all, 99.9% to be exact, of women-owned businesses are considered small businesses, again, fewer than 500 employees. Women-owned businesses appear in every industry group, but they are more prevalent in the service sector. For example, women own 90% of businesses in the childcare or daycare industry. Women-owned businesses, they generate 1.7 trillion in sales and employ nearly 9 million people. So it is a huge type of small business, as you can see, or has a huge impact. So to go a little bit more in detail about these women-owned businesses, about 40% of US small businesses, 37% of California small businesses, and 36% of San Diego small businesses are all owned by women. And today, as I was explaining earlier, there are more women entrepreneurs than there were 20 years ago. There was a huge hike. And 62% of women entrepreneurs cite their businesses as their primary source of income. when we look at the performance of these women-owned businesses and firms, they actually do very well. These companies perform as well or even outperform male-owned businesses. However, women business owners also face challenges, as we're going to see in the coming slides. They tend to be very small businesses with little to no cash reserve to weather the recessions as we're going through now. And also women entrepreneurs don't know or don't take advantage of available loans, grants, or venture funds, which is something that we will be talking more about in the coming slides. Becky will be talking more about that. So just as you can see in the slides, just 25% of women business owners seek business financing, and women receive just 7% of the venture funds from their startups. Female entrepreneurs tend to ask less when they apply for financing compared to men entrepreneurs or male entrepreneurs. And women-owned small businesses have been more heavily impacted by COVID than male-owned small businesses, as they are less likely to anticipate a strong recovery in the year ahead. The special report on women-owned small businesses during COVID-19 from the US Chamber of Commerce found that women-owned small businesses have less optimistic revenue, investment, and hiring plans compared to male-owned small businesses. So these are obviously important concerns, things that we need to look into in more detail. So now let's look at COVID-19 and how it affected small businesses in general. So according to businesswire.com, 2020, smaller businesses have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. Nearly 48% of businesses with 1 to 4 employees versus 37% of those with 20 to 49 employees have experienced a significant or severe impact from COVID. Current population survey suggests that the number of active business owners in the United States plummeted by 3.3 million or 22% over the crucial 2-month window from February to April 2020. The drop in active business owners was the largest on record, and losses to business activity were felt across nearly all industries. Small businesses do not have the kind of resources, as I mentioned before, to reserves to weather economic recession. There is also, interestingly, a racial component, even though our research does not look at the racial component in small businesses. It's important to mention the data shows that African-American business owners were hit the hardest by COVID-19. And they had a massive drop of 41% in business activity for African-American owned businesses. Latin businesses were also hit hard, losing 32% of active business owners in the first 6 months of the pandemic. And Asian business owners experienced a 26% decline in business activity. Immigrant business owners were also devastated with losses of 36% of business activity. So next, I'm going to turn it over to Becky so she can talk about specifically the challenges that women business owners, small business owners experienced during COVID. Becky?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Salva. And then I'll let you know when I'm done to move to the next slide, please.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. So fortunately, I was able to interview a representative from the Small Business Association here in San Diego to learn more about our own local community and what's going on with female business owners and how they've seen either a slowdown in their business or a complete dropping out. So the women that own their own business, where they have face-to-face interaction, is primarily the way that they conduct their business. They saw the hardest hit from the COVID and the restrictions. These are areas of senior care, children's daycare, nail salons, catering, pet services, retail clothing, very typical kinds of small businesses that we see in our communities. We're facing closure at very rapid rates. On average, if the company can open, they were taking nearly twice as long to recover due to the financial setbacks brought on by COVID. I think that thinking that COVID would not continue month after month after month, that was a huge impact on businesses and customers. And so because it's continuing to stay active, I feel like the fear factor, and that's what the Small Business Administration is recognizing, is that more education, communication needs to get out to entrepreneurs and to help them with learning how to secure loans and grants to supplement their loss. So there is a movement trying to save these small businesses that are so critical to our economy here in San Diego. Next slide, please. Okay. Here we're going to talk about relief packages and loans. So the funding programs are offered at a national, state, and local area for business owners. Across the nation, beginning in the first quarter, when we were first introduced to COVID by our businesses frantically losing the customers and the sales on the decline, there's programs that became more popular than others, such as the Small Business Aid, the Emergency Paycheck Protection Program, Small Business COVID-19 Relief Grants, and there was a rebuilding fund. There's also private loans from individuals and large organizations, because everyone realized that we were all going down. If you lose the small businesses, all of the employees that are involved, those are your customers in your area. So people were jumping in to try and figure out how can they help the small business owners, and especially the women-owned businesses. There is still a CARE Act offering business owners loans that would be fully forgiven as long as they followed the regulations of payroll cost, interest on mortgages, rent, and utilities. I talked to a couple of business owners, just business owners that I know, and asked them if they had applied for the CARE Act. And they responded with, "It's too good to be true. I don't trust it. I'm going to get myself deeper in debt if I take this, rather than my loss of my income. I'll have loss of income and higher expenses." So there is a fear factor clearly across all business owners in facing this pandemic. Because the COVID cases and the deaths are continuing to impact the world, business owners are continuing to monitor the website, searching for all types of aid, because each one, I personally looked at about 42 different kinds of grants or loan programs. And it's pretty complicated because each one has some special kind of criteria. So it's a constant searching through the internet. Luckily, we have the internet, but it's a constant searching and very discouraging because you spend hours searching and may not find anything. Slide 13, please. Next slide. Okay, yes, the interview. So the interview with the small business did shine a light on the San Diego communities, and I was lucky to have been able to talk specifically with one of the representatives that had already been working with several women business owners in San Diego. So she was able to describe marginal minority women-owned businesses and immigrants and refugees that cluster, forming specific kinds of cultural communities with their small businesses. And 14, yes, the findings. So the observations from the interviews and talking with small business owners are such. Number one, financing. It's the most difficult challenge for these groups of women entrepreneurs, especially because they have difficulty meeting the requirements for credit and for collateral. So even though we're in a pandemic, if you didn't have good credit or a lot of assets, and many small businesses did not, and especially women owned, they just kept looking and looking, trying to find someone that was not requiring that or some program that was not. Number two, the challenge of survival. So in finding out how are some of the businesses that were able to continue to stay open, how were they surviving? Well, they had family members pulling their resources together, their assets, to help leverage the downside that was happening in their business. Many of them, their family members became their new employees, so everyone pitching in to help each other. Another community that has primarily non-English speaking, so Hispanics primarily, were depending on their children because their children were out of school. There's no school. So now the children are at home and they're now reading, writing, speaking on behalf of their parent, their mother, to help manage the business affairs. So it was a very time of a lot of confusion and the complexity of what was running so normal was no longer there. Two other roadblocks that was mentioned to me is about cash sales. In many small businesses, cash is the normal dominant exchange for their businesses. Cash is not documented as well as credit cards and checks. So when you're running a cash business, it's very difficult for the women entrepreneurs to prove. So it's kind of undocumented to some degree, which hurt them in the end when they were trying to show that their company actually had a thriving business for them to qualify for a loan. Another area that was brought to my attention is that they weren't well skilled in using social media. So as we saw the virtual world step in, and many businesses began to thrive because they were not limited to the face-to-face, but they could have their business models adjusted to meet the advantage of virtual sales. So there was more education, and the small business representative talked a lot about different workshops and experts that they were deploying out to businesses virtually to help them try and make this shift. And the last area that was talked about in my interview was that there are several communities that are underutilized, meaning they're in high-risk areas, which are targeted for economic investment because the local residents are low income or maybe very little education, mostly minority. So those areas do struggle with running their businesses, and especially when you can't do face-to-face, that was a big hardship. Next slide, the future of research. Okay, so we do need to have more research. Obviously, businesses are personal, but there are lots of components that that stretch across all businesses. So there will be some commonality of the hardships that they have been enduring. And as we look at or look for the innovative solutions, we're going to be finding our way through what is being created as a new normal. What does that lifestyle look like? And so to improve the business opportunities for our women owners of small businesses, we are going to have to start conducting some surveys to dig a little bit deeper to find out more about their struggles, because it's not just money. Money's important, but there's so many other components that are somehow directly or indirectly related to the money. And look at who's resilient. How can we help each other? Where are the best practices for short run and the long term? In the next phase, after surveys, we're looking at interviews. And I think in San Diego, from my first experiences of reaching out to business owners, it will provide a very interesting look at their lived experiences through this first year of COVID. And the findings will help us to enable us to find solutions to document, to help women across all of the state, not just San Diego, because with these primary barriers that they've encountered, the strategies can be applied to weather the economic crisis, even if it's not COVID, anything coming up. So businesses that survive will be stronger. And I know that the Small Business Administration has been deploying some really good strategies. And one in particular that was discussed with me was about helping women businesses secure different types of governmental contracts, whether it be at the national, state, or local level. Thank you.